And good morning, everyone, and welcome to PerfWeb 78, day one. Day one of PerfWeb 78 is the Tammy Sparacino Journal Club, and I know that she is so incredibly excited today. She came in today, and her article is on air inflammation and biocompatibility of the extracorporeal circuits. It looks like it comes from Italy. There's a lot of Italian names here from the Journal of Perfusion. And she has told me from the minute she walked in how excited she was that this was one of the best articles and easiest articles that she has ever had to review, and is excited about telling everyone about this topic today and teaching us a lot. Did I get that right? Mm-hmm. I did? Very good, very good. She is very excited. She also has goat. She's going to keep goat with her today, and we're going to get through today. So you can find us on the web, perfweb.us. You can go to contact@perfusioneducation.com. You can go to, look at the scrolling on the bottom. It'll tell you everything that you can do. And we're going to have ourselves a great show. I think I just got goat shoved back at me. Here, there, there, and there's our call-in number. Okay, we're a serious bunch here. Let's go to the double shot, if you don't mind. I don't want to be on there all by myself. There you go. I need a witness in case anything happens to me today. So I don't want to be a single shot at all. I want Tammy to be always on air.
Wow.
All right. Oh, yeah, the app and the podcast. So we have our podcast. You can go to any of your podcasting software. Which is it, the app or the podcast? You just put the app. I mean, okay, look. I mean, okay, the podcast. You can go to Spotify. You can go to Podbean. You can go to all different. And is it Podbean or is it Podbeam? Bean. Bean with an N? That doesn't make sense. Why wouldn't you make it pod beam? Because you're beaming it. None of this makes sense to me. All of this stuff, these names. There's our app. You can go check us out, get your favorite podcasting service, and you can find our app. Now, this app, that's a different story. Now, all joking aside, the critical care app for perfusionists is a fantastic app. It's got perfusion, ECMO, hemodynamics, clinical calculators, conversions, and it has an IV rate calculator. The IV rate calculator is actually a separate app you can get. That's 99 cents, and it's absolutely fantastic for nurses in the critical care unit or even anesthesia in the operating room. But it's got a lot of really neat stuff in it. The critical care app, the bigger app's $2.99. And I'm just going to tell you right now, I think that it's for the value. The value is there. It does a lot of good stuff. You can calculate a lot of stuff. If you're there taking care of ECMO patients, if you're in the operating room, whatever the case may be, I strongly suggest it. Reach out to us, talk to us. We're a fun group. We're easy to get along with. We are trying to have fun with this process of education because it is quite serious. But sometimes you just got to have some fun with it all and be silly. And that's why we have the GOAT, because I think Tammy feels today is going to be a tough day for her, and it's going to be a GOAT day. Tammy, it's on you.
Okay, thanks. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Journal Club, PerfWeb 78, day one. Today we are going to be talking about this article that is titled Air Inflammation and Biocompatibility of the Extracorporeal Circuits, published in the Journal of Perfusion.
You love that journal.
I do like this journal. It's got very interesting articles. In 2020, by Ignacio Condelo and his colleagues.
Let me borrow your pen.
Sure.
Thanks.
Okay, let me read the abstract to you. The inflammatory response in cardiac surgery using extracorporeal circuit has widely been discussed in the literature with analysis of cytokines released in humans, demonstrating manifold trigger causes. To mitigate this response, mainly linked to contact and recognition by the blood of a non-self surface, many efforts have been made to make the circuits of extracorporeal circulation biomimetics.
Mimetic.
Mimetics. Is that what
Biomimetic.
Biomimetics. There we go. Trying to emulate the cardiovascular system. In other words, biomedical companies have developed many biocompatible products in order to reduce the invasiveness of the ECC. One of the techniques used to reduce the contact of blood with non-self surfaces is coating of the internal surfaces of the ECC. This can be done with okay, let's start again. This can be done with phospholipidic. Is that right?
I don't know. I'm not sure where you are. I'm looking. Where are you?
I'm in the this can be done center.
Passive coating?
Nope. Right after the word ECC.
I'm looking.
Follow along. Are you with me?
Phospholipidic.
Yeah, okay. So
You had that right.
phospholipidic, electronically neutral.
Electrically neutral.
Oh, goodness gracious. Electrically neutral and heparin derivatives with anticoagulant activity. The coating can be divided into two categories. The passive coating with phosphorylcholine by biomedical companies, and the administration of albumin added to the priming during the filling of the circuit by the perfusionist. Alternately, we have the active coating, treatment of the internal surfaces in contact with the blood with neutral proteins and heparin. The latter are different according to the production company, but the aim is always to maintain high levels of systemic and local anticoagulation, inactivating the contact coagulation between the blood and the surfaces. A recent study demonstrates that the use of active coating is associated with better preservation of the endothelial
glycocalyx.
I knew that one. Glycocalyx compared with passive coated circuits. Okay, so here we go. Got some.
I'm glad you picked this one. Did you pick this?
I did not pick this. You picked this. Yeah. Okay, so we've got a couple figures to get through. And there's actually, this article is pretty short, and there's not a lot of explanation for these figures, so we're just going to touch on them because I'm confused about a couple things that they're referring to. It's not really explained in the article. But for the standard, or what they call conventional, that's what the C stands for, ECC, you have your venous management is via a reservoir, and then you have your roller pump, centrifugal pump, and oxygenator. Then you have your intracavitary suction via a roller pump, so that's going to be like vents. And then your extracavitary suction, which of course like your roller pump and cell saver.
Pump sucker.
Yeah, pump sucker. All right. Now, when you're looking at what's called the micro ECC, your venous management is done by the patient's body. That's your reservoir. And then you have a closed circuit. You still have centrifugal pump and oxygenator, no roller head pumps because that would introduce air. And then you have your intracavitary suction that would be fed directly into your circuit, and then your extracavitary has to be through cell saver, so there's still no air. Okay, and then this is their unique circuit, the Fibonacci. And what they developed, or what they talk about in this technique article, because that's what this is, it's a technique article, is applying a small amount of vacuum to their venous reservoir, still using an oxygenator and a centrifugal pump, and then their intracavitary and extracavitary suction are all drained by the vacuum that is applied to the venous reservoir. Looking at the conventional ECC versus the minimally invasive ECC, or their unique Fibonacci ECC, Here's the pros and the cons. So for conventional, you can use it for all procedures. The cons, you have hemodilution, roller pump usage, presence of the blood-air interface, and the risk of hemolysis. For a minimally invasive ECC, there's no blood air interface. You have reduced contact surface because it's a smaller circuit, reduced lines, reduced hemodilution, there's no roller pumps, there's reduced hemolysis. The cons, it's difficult to keep your goals. For example, the blood-air interface absence and reduced hemolysis due to the use of suction and aspirators that would have blood-air interfaces. Their circuit, the Fibonacci, there are no roller pumps. There are reduced hemolysis for all procedures. It's usable. That's the thing with the minimally invasive. If you have no additional suction or drains, it's not really useful for everything, only cabbages, right? And then the cons of the Fibonacci would be there is some blood-air interface. However, they do talk about that because of the negative pressure that is applied, about 40 milligrams, negative 40 milligrams of mercury.
Millimeters.
Yep, that one, millimeters of mercury. That they are using the idea of the perfect gas laws, and that the quantity of the gas is directly proportional to the barometric pressure to 0, or at least to reduce the concentration of nitrogen in the air of the blood-air interface. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay. That's all I had on this article. There was an original article where they did their study on their Fibonacci, and I got to be honest, it was a little bit over my head in some of these things, so we're not going to get too much into that. I did find, but it did spark my interest in minimally invasive extracorporeal circulation circuits, and I found this article that was published in the Journal of Thoracic Disease in 2019 by Jenny and Associates. They're out of Switzerland, and it kind of broke down the different types, because I'm not very familiar with microcircuits. I've never used one. I've never even seen one in person.
You never used the MEC system? Did you not remember the MEC system that
No.
It was by I believe it was either Baxter or it was Edwards, and I can't remember, or maybe it was Baxter Edwards. Yeah, and it was a system where they cannulated fem-fem and totally closed system, so there was no reservoir.
Yeah.
And they were doing everything from valves to but any
Never saw it.
any suction from the chest or intracavitary suction had to go to the cell saver.
Yeah. No. Never seen that. So
It failed.
it failed. Okay. This article actually I thought was really informative. I enjoyed it a lot. And I'll just read to you a little bit from it. So the main challenge of modern cardiac perfusion technologies is the achievement of optimal biocompatibility of the extracorporeal circuits. So it talks about the side effects in conventional cardiopulmonary bypass. Our organ systems are triggered by complement system activation through foreign surfaces, hemodilution through priming volumes, the blood-air contact, as well as negative positive pressures in the reservoir. So to overcome all of these negative effects, the minimally invasive cardiac or the minimally invasive extracorporeal circuit have been evolving for the last 20 years.
Right, and if you take that I out,
Yeah.
because it's little, right?
Yeah.
That's the MEC system.
Oh.
MECC.
Oh, I see. I see.
The I just wasn't, as silent, so to speak.
Yeah, I gotcha. Okay, so they talk about that there's several potential advantages because you reduce the systemic inflammatory response and then the subsequent organ dysfunction. The main components of minimally invasive ECC must include a closed CPB circuit, a biologically inert blood contact surfaces, so it must be coated, reduced priming volume, a cardioplegia system, a venous bubble trap, venous air removing device, and a shed blood management system. And then they're classified into 4 types with modular components, which are described in the following sections. So,
Can I say something or no?
yeah.
So just go back to the previous slide.
Yep.
There are no biologically inert blood contact surfaces. We have things that are
Right.
intended to mitigate it to some degree, but a true, what would be an endothelial mimetic
Yes.
or artificial
Yes.
endothelial layer does not exist.
Right.
Right, period.
Right. Well, I think their point is that it has to be coated with something
Right, so you could have some kind
to be
of
classified this.
Right.
Because these are the characteristics.
some kind of, really what it comes down to is it is an inflammatory mitigation coating, perhaps, if you want to call it that. But but when we do, I mean, really, at the end of the day, ECMO, VAVV, is a completely closed system. There is no blood-air interface.
Yeah, we're going to get into that a little bit as they talk
Okay,
about
then
the
I'll
different
stop,
types.
because there's a point I'm trying to make with it, which I'll make later then.
Okay. So the main goal of type 1 is the avoidance of the CPB-related shortcomings. So a type 1 is going to consist of closed circuit, which includes an oxygenator and a pump. No venous reservoir. All the components are coated with heparin, which is not necessarily true, I don't think, but the tubing is significantly reduced in length. The main applications of type 1 would be ECLS and CABG. For CABG, this is a closed heart procedure, so obviously you're able to reduce the systems to a minimum: centrifugal pump, membrane oxygenator, and the tubing lines. A venous bubble trap is not incorporated, and there's no venting lines. Any of the shed blood is going to go to your cell saver. Let's see, for type 2, what you implement is you add the component of the venous bubble trap or some kind of venous air removing device. Additionally, a pulmonary artery vent can be integrated into the type 2 circuit, and then the shed blood is still separated and processed into cardiotomy suction. Due to the closed circuit's construction, there is no shifting of volume, and the patient's own venous capacitance serves as the volume compensation system. To avoid a volume overload with consecutive hemodilution, the cardioplegia strategy needs to be adapted. Therefore, the integration of low-volume cardioplegia technique is ideal and feasible. So, like something like the Quest, I'm assuming.
Right.
All components of this circuit are coated, the tubing is significantly reduced, and the characteristics permit the reduction of priming volume to between 5 and 650 compared to the standard ECC. The reduction of the foreign surface, separation of shed blood, and avoidance of the blood-air contact also allows for some reduction in your ACTs. Anticoagulation, they give a formula here, is achieved by administration of heparin infusion of 150 IE per kilogram for a target range of 300 to 500.
Yeah, there's no question that without the reason why we need our ACTs as high as we have them on traditional cardiopulmonary bypass is because of the reservoir, which has, because we do very low ACTs, very low PTTs when we do ECMO because we have such a short transit time. But there's another reason why you do that, and I'm listening to this, but I'm listening to it, and it's causing me anxiety. And I had anxiety when this was a thing, when this was something that everyone wanted to do. I remember that time. And I was like, no, I don't think this is such a good idea. I was very opposed to this mech system back, but I listened intently. The thing is, you don't only have to be concerned about the reservoir basically gelatinizing because of that, but you are occluding blood vessels in the body while they're doing the coronaries. So you have longer periods.
It's not just
of
about the
stasis.
circuit.
Right.
Right.
And so having using this idea, so you're coating your circuit with heparin, but then you're wanting to minimize the amount of heparin that you give systemically because you don't have a reservoir, but you do have static flow. None of it ever made sense to me.
It contradicts itself for sure.
I think it does.
Well,
I don't know how you feel, but that's how I feel.
I think most of the coatings now aren't heparin coated. That was the original thing we started with, right? I think it was, what was it called? Carmita coating from Medtronic was heparin based. But I think now pretty much all the circuits have some sort of bio coating on it, but it's not heparin anymore, correct?
I think they still have heparin. That's like, I think Carmita.
Yes, but just Carmita. But, you know,
all the others are the way it's extruded. It's not actually a coating. It's some type of extrusion process that causes the plasma to the first pass to lay down and create that barrier to the artificial surface. Modema has I wonder if a graphene surface would work within the body. Good question. Graphene is an allotrope of carbon consisting of a single layer of atoms arranged in a two-dimensional honeycomb lattice nanostructure. Okay, Modema. We're perfusionists, number one.
That's fascinating.
That is fascinating, number two. And number three, I don't know if you have access to goats or pigs, but you may want to do some studies on this because if this works, you may become very wealthy.
That's right.
So one never knows. I don't know. That's a good question, but I know that all joking aside, when they extrude these tubings, they create these etchings in them. They're called smart coatings, but they call it coatings, but it's really not even a coating, right?
Okay.
And because the heparin, when they did the heparin, there was washout.
Yes.
Right? But again, if your goal is to lay down a plasma barrier across the surface, then you're sort of getting a pseudo quasi endothelialization, but it really isn't endothelium.
Right.
And there was a lot of issues. It'd probably mess up all the circuits. I don't know. We don't know.
I don't know for sure.
We don't know. It's certainly been a problem for many years.
Yes.
And, most people don't like their blood circulation going through artificial devices over time, because they'll interact with it over time. They do adapt to it, and that inflammatory process goes away. The challenge we have with heart surgery is it doesn't last long enough for that to occur.
We see it in ECMO.
We see it in ECMO, yes, and it takes about 4 days for the inflammatory process that's generated from the ECMO circuit itself to eventually diminish. So that's, but in heart surgery, it lasts, you're on bypass for an hour or two, or depending on who you're working with, could be 3 or 4 hours, but it's not 4 days, right?
Right.
It's a relatively short period of time.
So let's talk about from type 1 and 2 to type 3. So for any open heart procedures like aortic or mitral valves, you have to change the ECC fundamentally. Valvular surgery, you're going to need some sort of venting, and you are going to have blood-air interaction much more present, obviously, because the heart's open. So the main difference between type 1, type 2, and type 3 is the ability to control volume shifts and variations more efficiently. This is achieved by different modular steps. First, you're going to integrate a volume collection bag in the MIECC circuit for situations during when simple patient positioning maneuvers aren't sufficient to correct the excessive volume shifts. Secondly,
reverse Trendelenburg, trying to use the venous capacitance system
exactly
as
maneuvering the bed, right? Secondly, the implementation of specific components such as an additional bubble trap, a soft bag, or a hard shell reservoir to handle collected vent blood. The main challenge for the type 3 is to preserve the main principles of what it is to be a minimal invasive extracorporeal technology, such as closed circuit, biologically inert blood contact surfaces, reduced priming, a cardioplegia system, a venous bubble trap to remove air, and a shed blood management system. Because you think about it, the more things you add, the more volume you're adding. If you have a blood-air interface, that goes against what a minimally invasive ECC is supposed to be. And how do you manage excessive volume? One of the main issues for the type 3 is the integration of one or more of the following concepts. Pulmonary arterial vent, aortic root vent, a left ventricular vent. Those modifications will help guarantee a blood-free surgical field. Looking at them individually, pulmonary artery venting, the main advantage is you can connect the vent directly to the circuit line. Therefore, the vent performance is, that makes the vent performance directly dependent on the negative pressure generated by the centrifugal pump. And that's what the first article talked about, right?
But that can be substantial.
Yeah. However, there's a limiting factor. That is a limiting factor. The speed of the centrifugal pump needs to be adjusted to the amount of venous return in order to avoid the venous vascular collapse and subsequent instability of the perfusion circuit.
That we call chatter.
Right. Exactly. I was going to say.
They're basically doing this with ECMO.
Right.
It's VA ECMO that they're doing heart surgery with.
Right. Furthermore, pulmonary artery venting does not directly drain the left ventricle and cannot de-air the left heart during the reperfusion phase. The retransfusion rate of volume drained by a pulmonary artery vent into the minimally invasive circuit without any blood-air contact is one of the major advantages. Looking at LV venting, the integration of an LV vent combines the advantages of better LV drainage and effective de-airing during the reperfusion phase. However, you have to give up the avoidance of the blood-air contact. Consequently, the shed blood collected by the LV vent cannot be drained directly into the circuit because you're going to have a risk of air embolus, right?
Exactly.
Right.
That's one of the big problems with this thing. And they have, of course, they put the venous air trap in there. But if any air goes through, it shuts your pump off because it's going back.
Right, exactly. Got through that. Okay. Can't be drained. There are different approaches to retransfusion of the blood volume from the LV vent. One possibility is the use of a venous bubble trap, which is connected in line to a soft bag reservoir or direct retransfusion into the circuit. Another option, which avoids the venous bubble trap, is the direct but manual cross-clamp connection to a hard shell reservoir. The collected volume can be intermittently retransfused into the minimally invasive circuit by manually declamping the connection line. Also, the LV vent and pulmonary artery vent can both be controlled by an additional roller pump and therefore remain independent performance of the centrifugal pump. Okay, now that we got through all that, they have a really nice graphic. So here is how you would do this. So you can see that on the bottom, you've got your basic circuit, right? So you've got your centrifugal pump. Well, first off, I guess I can go ahead and do this. And we'll go with this. All right, so you've got coming from the patient, you're going through here. You've got some pressure monitoring. You've got a bubble trap going through an air detector, centrifugal pump, oxygenator, and then all the way back around to the patient. Now, if that would work great for, a cabbage. If you're wanting to do some venting, you can use roller head pumps. So you can use a vent suction line, go through a pump, and then it goes into some sort of reservoir. Okay, they've got a hard shell here. You can also do cardiotomy suction through a roller pump and into your hard shell reservoir. And then you're controlling the flow of that into your circuit by a manual clamp. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this because I'm actually kind of familiar with this idea, and I'll tell you why here. Let's see, done, and we'll get through here. So the summary of this particular is that 1 and 2 are dependent on the venous return and the patient's venous capacitance, serving as the volume compensation system. Both types cannot adapt to large volume shifts and have a limited range of performance, CABGs and ECLS. Both types are effective in the reduction of systemic or system components and fulfill all principles of the minimally invasive ECC. The reduction of the foreign surface area, the separation of shed blood, and the avoidance of the blood-air contact. They even permit you to have lower ACTs. Okay.
Which I'm very uncomfortable with.
Well, but their lower ACTs was 300.
That's fair.
That's not that low.
That's not really that low.
Right.
That's true.
Okay. For open heart surgery, however, you're going to need a type 3, which is able to control volume shifts more efficiently through the implementation of a volume reservoir bag and of a pulmonary artery venting or LV venting. One of the main requirements during the minimally invasive ECC type 3 is the retransfusion of shed blood. The primary goal of handling the shed blood is for it to be separated into autologous retransfusion systems, like a cell saver.
Aren't there not like currently some programs that don't use any pump sucker
Yes.
at all? All suction goes to the cell saver.
Yes, and I'm going to let's talk about that after I get through this summary because I have some stuff to say about that. Okay. In this regard, evidence is lacking as to, I skipped a line here. The primary goal is handling the shed blood. Very critically thinking, types 3 and types 4 diverge from the original concept of the minimized CPB circuit. In this regard, evidence is lacking as to whether the use of intraoperative autologous retransfusion systems reduces allogenic blood product utilization, which is the amount of shed blood volume and which amount of shed blood volume can be processed without negatively influencing non-surgical hemostasis. The requirements of type 1 and type 2 mainly focus on sufficient circulation during CABG procedures in ECLS. In contrast, the requirements of the type 3 are higher since preservation of volume equilibrium is mandatory by closely managing shed blood retransfusion and avoiding venous collapse during close observation of the centrifugal pump speed. Furthermore, if a hard shell reservoir is used for LV venting or shed blood collection, the blood-air contact cannot be avoided, which in turn will increase the inflammatory response. The classification of these circuits provides a clear definition of the different systems and gives a clear distinction between conventional and minimally invasive. Minimally invasive presents a physiologically based perfusion strategy, not just another CPB circuit or particular product. For this reason, a multidisciplinary approach is mandatory. Close collaboration between surgeons, anesthesiologists, and perfusionists is paramount importance for safe and efficient application of this minimally invasive ECC concept. And that's it.
Okay. You were going to say some things.
Yeah, I'm going to say some things. Okay, so we can take the slides down, David. Actually, I guess it was maybe my second job. I went to a place that used venous soft shell reservoir. And we had a separate cardiotomy for all suction, all venting and all suction. Mm-hmm. And we isolated that, and very similar to what they were talking about in their diagram here, this second article. And you only added that shed blood if you absolutely had to. If you did not need it during the course of the you saved it and sent it to the cell saver because the idea was the same. You're trying to, they were doing all the same things other than reduction in priming volume and shortening your lines. But you were keeping the primary goal of that was to reduce blood-air interface, right? Now, have you ever used it? Have you ever had a system where you tried to isolate that? Because I know that we were just talking about some places put all of their suction type blood over to the cell saver.
Yes. And no, I've never actually done that. However, I have thought about it. I've done a lot of cases where the suction blood was so profound and just a massive amount. Of course, it's a double-edged sword, and I see the foam and the blood looks terrible, and it's going into the cardiotomy. It does come back out looking a little bit nicer,
especially if you have the separate cardiotomy, and then it runs through the defoamer on the venous blood as well. So it's got two passes, right? Right.
But the problem is that and I've seen it, that blood-air interface and reaction, and you can see the blood being really turned into something sometimes unrecognizable, but without it, I couldn't have done the case. If it was all going over there was too much blood, too much suction. So I think if it's a minimal suction case, or maybe an average amount of suction, you can deal with it. Of course, you have to get that blood processed and back in for the red cells. If you lose enough, you're going to lose your plasma volume. You're going to lose your platelets. There's a yin and a yang. There's a positive and negative.
And if you're really trying to do that, you're going to have to minimize your circuit anyway. You're going to have to shorten your lines for sure, because you're going to need to lessen your amount of circuit volume that you have, because you're constantly losing that volume, especially if you're venting.
Yes.
Right? It's going to the cell saver.
Right. And you're going to have to,
You're going to have volume issues.
You're going to have volume issues. You're either going to have to add volume. You're going to have to go with lower flows. You're going to have to, there's a lot of, it makes the case, I very busy. I'm not sure, of course, everything is that you have to consider the risk-benefit equation, and are the benefits from this worth what the risks are? And as a technique, I don't see it as having gained much in the way of popularity.
Yeah, I think I read some article, and it's not one I used here, that even though this technique has been around for over 20 years, less than 4% of the cases are done using these types of minimally invasive closed circuits.
Yeah, and I'm surprised at that. I'm surprised it's even that high. So for the audience, how a heart-lung machine cardiopulmonary bypass circuit works, just to give you an idea, the primary circulation portion of it, which is the venous drainage, which is used to keep the heart empty so that it's not distended and full of volume, because you have to operate on it, goes in a reservoir, which can be either a bag, which is closed, or an open reservoir, which is a hard shell. And there is, in a hard shell reservoir, air above but it's an oxygen environment at that point in time, unless you're sucking air from somewhere else, but I don't want to make this overly complicated. And then that blood comes out and goes through a pump and goes back into the patient. And there's no real blood-air interface in that. Now, in the old days, we used bubble oxygenators. But I don't want to get into that right now. That becomes too complicated and really off topic. But with a pump sucker, the what we call the sucker and the vents and things like that, especially if the heart is open, you have a roller pump, which is a positive displacement pump. And a roller pump spins around, compresses the tubing, creates a negative pressure, and then it's a positive pressure and pumps it along. So like a rolling pin going around a raceway. Well, if you have a chest cavity that's open and there's bleeding and there's blood there, they put a wand, and it's a suction wand. It goes in there, and the pump is turning and it sucks that blood up. Well, along with sucking that blood up, it also sucks air from the surgical field. That air comes through the line, goes into the what would be the cardiotomy reservoir, we call it, where the suction blood goes. And the air, of course, separates from the blood at that point in time. The blood goes through a filter and defoamer and then gets put back into the body. So that's kind of how it works for those who aren't, like, really aware of how that happens. But that blood interface exists in the line itself as well. So as the blood is being
you can
sucked,
do to try
it sloshes,
mitigate it, right? So that's why they often might be using CO2 in the field.
Yes.
So hopefully that the air that's being sucked up along with that is more CO2, which is more dissolvable. I mean, the main thing we're worried about is nitrogen.
Right. But then also those suctions and vents can get occluded in the tissue and collapse that tubing. And there's blood and gas, air, CO2, doesn't whatever in there, and it collapses and releases, releases. And you see it just destroys the blood that's in. I mean, that blood is destroyed. Now, we try to mitigate that. When something gets occluded like that, we usually will say sucker stuck, vent stuck, whatever the case may be, and we expect them to fix that by moving it. Somebody up there at the field is going to do that. If they don't, we generally will turn it off to try and not just allow that continued trauma to occur.
Right.
But those are all part of what we do for a living. That's what we get paid for. I'm just not really certain, in my estimation. Again, having seen MEC, the minimally invasive extracorporeal circuit, having seen MEC in its from its inception, from when it was first released, and how they were pushing it. But that's one specific
brand, correct?
No, MEC is a concept, and it's just that there was a brand also called MEC.
That's what I mean. So you're referring to the concept or the brand?
Both.
Okay.
The concept itself. So
okay.
But because the brand, the concept is the same regardless of which companies it was. So whichever oxygenator or centrifugal pump or tubing or whatever.
Yeah, because I think in this
MEC is MEC.
It's
just that somebody decided to call their system MEC.
MEC, right, which is a little confusing. Because actually I believe in the first article by Condello's, their original study that they did with this, they actually used the LivaNova system.
Yeah, you can do that too. Yes, they had one. I remember when Sorn, it was Sorn at the time, I thought.
I think they create their own.
Yes, you do. And we could create our own.
We could. That was my point, is anyone could create it.
Yes, it's all a MEC system.
Right.
There just happened to be one also as a brand MEC.
Yes,
but
yes.
Notwithstanding, the very first MEC system
was called MEC. Okay.
And they were trying to convince me to use it. And I was in New Orleans at the time. And there were a couple of surgeons that really wanted to use it. I did not, and I didn't use it. I ended up not using it. I think a couple of people in town did use it, but it didn't go well, and so they abandoned it pretty early on. I've listened to a couple of really good presentations from some European colleagues that used it all the time.
It's more common in Europe, for sure.
Really believed in it and seemed to do really well with it. I just never saw the results they were having duplicated anywhere here in the United States.
Just with my limited experience, so I guess about 3.5 years of consistently using a venous reservoir bag, that has a reservoir for volume, but yet that was the number one complaint, is that constantly was we weren't draining well. Can you imagine if you were using something that has no place to keep that volume?
Right, and vacuum-assisted venous return is so much easier
Absolutely.
to work with.
Yeah,
And,
right.
You know,
We would always use for the bags kinetic assist, which is terrible.
yes, kinetic assist. Yeah, that's dreadful. But you know, VAVD, of course, that's been around forever as well. Right? VAVD actually came out. I think it predates the MEC system. And there was all that controversy, you know, about vacuum will create air. You're going to be pumping air to the patient. There were surgeons that were scared to death of using it. None of it made sense. I mean, it doesn't make sense why that would happen, but that's what they would believe.
Well, I mean, I guess if you used extremely high negative pressures, I don't know.
I've used very high negative pressures before.
But what are you calling extremely high?
Negative 90?
Okay, but what if you're using negative 200?
Well, but who would do that?
But that's my point. But
yeah, but that wouldn't even make sense.
It doesn't. But neither does what you're saying, that we're going to pull
You'd be
air.
flowing backwards if you had negative 200.
You'd be flowing backwards. That's true. Okay, did we get any more questions?
So they're looking into graphene. They are some Medema and Patrick Hollywood are apparently going to join forces and come up with the use
Great.
of graphene. And somebody's asking, what does graphene do within the body? You know,
I don't
Patrick, the question was for Patrick. I have no idea. But if you could make the graphene so that it was on the tubing but did not leach out.
Yeah.
That's what you're going to try to accomplish, right? But remember, the tubing has to be flexible and clampable, and there's a lot of other little pieces to this that you have to take into consideration. So, you know, if I can help in any way, please don't hesitate to reach out and talk to me. We can maybe show you some tubing and clamp it and play with it and do a simulation in here or whatever, and it may help you in your endeavor. That'd be fantastic. Just do me a favor. Let me have, like, you know, how about 0.1% of the royalties, 0.1% of 1% of the royalties for Tammy and I. No, so I think this was a really good, I actually think it was a really good article, and I think you did a really good job getting through that.
Well, it was a
It's
little bit
complicated.
rough. Yeah, it's very complicated, especially if Ignacio Candello, I mean, I bet he's a pretty smart guy.
Yes.
Reading
yeah.
his other articles. So, you know, I always love people who are trying to innovate what we do to try to make it. And, you know, he's not doing, sometimes you see these things, which we've done an article or two, where they are innovating for the sake of innovating. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
It makes things overly complex when you already have a system that works just
Right,
fine.
like RAP versus ultrafiltration. You're making it overly complicated when all you have to do is just ultrafiltrate.
I disagree with that, but
For no good reason. You don't even have a good reason to disagree, but we'll have that discussion.
right. But I do think that his idea, you know, he has really put a lot of research and thought and measurements using ultrasound system on trying to make the circuit better for the patient. And there hasn't been, you know, there was a lot of innovation when you first came out with the coatings, as they discussed, but then really nothing much since then. There's been things that were tried, you know, like the minimally invasives, the smaller circuits, but really nothing has caught on. So I do commend him on trying to find something to move us along from a perfusion standpoint of innovation for that.
Yeah, I do too. The real question is, does it translate into improved outcomes post-operatively
Right.
by how we measure outcomes? Major morbidity, mortality,
Yep.
kidney injury, stroke, length of stay, you know, return to normal living, neurologic consequences, all of those things. And, you know, without getting into it too deeply, we used bubble oxygenators, and yes, there were more patients then than today that developed some neurologic complications post-operatively. But they, by and large, did really well. That's how cardiac surgery grew, you know, before we had membrane oxygenators.
But you wouldn't go back to it.
To a bubble oxygenator? Very elegantly simple design. Probably not, but I guess if that's all we had,
Yeah.
I think we would. I think if that's all we had for some reason, yeah, it worked pretty well. And I think there are ways of mitigating even that we know more now that we didn't know then. So I wouldn't. Let's just hypothetically say that it was all I had. I wouldn't be. No, we can't do that. God forbid. It's a horrible thing to do. We can't do it. No, I mean I would. Sure. Yeah, they work really well.
There'd have to be some retraining.
It's not very complicated. The blood comes in. It bubbles and it turns into arterial blood. Instead of a venous reservoir, you now have an arterial reservoir. That's the only difference. And then it pumps out and goes to the patient. You can't use VAVD for obvious reasons, but it works fine.
Well,
I think. Okay, so it looks like Medema is going to work on it,
Great.
and we're all here to save lives. Well, that
Absolutely.
and with my 1/10 of a profit, I hate to get rich too. So come on, help us out here. We're wanting to get rich. All right. Okay.
what's on the program tomorrow?
Tomorrow is going to be good question.
We have PerfWeb 78 Day 2 with
Yes.
John Ingram starting at 3 o'clock our time, Central Time.
Yeah, it's actually going to be really good because his and mine dovetail nicely
Nice.
together. Yeah, his is going to be urine output on CPB. When is enough? And because mine is, and on Thursday, does ultrafiltration reduce urine output on CPB,
Right.
and what is the evidence? This is very provocative. And actually, on Thursday, I'm going to be as provocative as I have ever been. I know you're not going to be here. You're on
not.
vacation.
I am.
But you can tune in and watch because
That'll be exactly what I'm
going to
doing.
say some things. Really?
I'll probably watch it from the library, I'm going to be honest.
From the library?
You know, once it's put on the library.
Oh, where are you going on Thursday? Can you tell us or not? Is it secret?
It's
where
not
are you going?
secrets. Not going anywhere. But I'm probably not going to watch PerfWeb.
So you're going to be in town?
Yeah.
Well, then you can come.
I have plans.
What are they? That's what I've been trying to ask.
I have plans with my family.
Okay. You have a family?
I do.
I never knew that. I didn't know you had a family. We can, but well, we're not through. I'm still trying to get.
He's trying to tell us how he's going to be provocative.
I'm trying to elucidate information from Tammy about where she's going and what she's doing and that kind of a thing. So, but I'm not getting very far. I'm getting nowhere in a hurry. But with that said, I'm going to be very provocative because I feel that, and I just tell people if they're going to be watching, there was a recent article written by Al Stammers and Linda Mongero about ultrafiltration and cardiopulmonary bypass, which I believe, and I read the article, and I've read the article several times now, and I've also done an extensive search on all of the available data about ultrafiltration and kidney injury and renal failure and all of that sort of thing. And their article, which did get published, I think is in my opinion, and I'll just tell you my opinion prior to the show, which I'll reinforce during the show and why I feel the way I do, has done an incredible disservice to our industry and our community. And I feel very strongly about it because I think
the article said you can over ultrafiltrate and therefore...
No, the article says that ultrafiltration on cardiopulmonary bypass leads to kidney injury and renal failure. And I think that it is the evidence is overwhelming to the contrary of that. And we're going.
This is a recent article?
Relatively recent, and I'm going to dive into it.
Okay.
They used their patients from the hospitals that they have contracts as a company, and did like a some kind of a data search. There's a lot of really complicated graphs and data and all of that kind of stuff, but the evidence, and I'll tell you, Jeff Riley, who's awfully well-known guy, has an incredible article that I'm going to really be talking about with meta-analyses on all of these papers that have been done about ultrafiltration, really good studies where it was specific and shows just exactly the opposite.
Wow, that is going to be a great discussion.
It's provocative because they're competing conclusions.
Yeah.
And very competing, like 180 degree apart.
Wow. And
it makes my job very challenging. In fact, I had a good conversation with my good friend Barbara Williams-Beard down in Clear Lake yesterday. We had lunch together, and we actually were talking about this very subject because one of the surgeons that she works with happened to have seen that article and was arguing with her about the ultrafiltration, doing ultrafiltration on bypass. And, fortunately, Barbara's really, really good at what she does and is able to clearly articulate, and why that article had issues and why this is a much better thing to do, getting the surgeon to better understand the role of ultrafiltration on bypass. But, she still, if she had not been who she was, you could lose the ability to do something that is so incredibly beneficial off of what I considered to be agenda-driven research, and that's a separate problem. That's another topic that I'd like to discuss someday, and that is, articles that are written that have agendas other than the search for truth, and there are a lot of those that exist. Many.
Yeah.
So we can have that discussion.
I mean, research is supposed to answer a question. You're not supposed to know the answer to the question before you do the research.
Agreed. You can have a hypothesis.
Sure.
But you have to,
But you don't seek to prove your hypothesis. You gather information to see if your hypothesis is true.
That's true. That is correct. I agree with you. Okay.
All right.
It is, Medima's looking forward to it. I wish you could make it because it's going to be good. I'm going to be fired up.
Yeah, I bet you are.
I'm going to have
Are we spinning the wheel?
I mean, I think we could spin the wheel for Medima.
Yeah.
Has Medima won anything before?
I don't know.
Medima wins a lot. I think Medima wins a lot of stuff. We're going to figure it out. Medima. Did Medima ever send us her address?
I don't know.
I don't remember. Medima, you have to go to contact@perfusioneducation.com and send us, because I think you've won several things and we've never gotten them to you. I can't really remember. But contact@perfusioneducation.com. David's going to put it up. And there it is. You need to send us your physical mailing address because we're going to spin the wheel.
And first and last name.
Yeah, and first and last name.
Okay, let's spin the wheel.
Here we go. I love that graphic.
Oh, come on, stop right there.
And you got extra call for Medima. Well, we don't need to mail that to you.
I'm spinning again.
No, she won extra call.
I'm spinning again.
Maybe she gets paid for call. You just made her some money. She's going to get an aortic dissection while she's on call. Cup. All right. Did you hit that and stop it?
I can't. can't do that.
Okay, so you didn't get an aortic dissection while on call, so good for you, but you did win a cup. We need your physical mailing address. Contact at perfusioneducation.com, and we will get this mailed out to you. I don't care where you are in the world. I don't know at this point in time. You could be anywhere. Doesn't matter. We can ship it to you, and we're going to ship you a couple of cups so that you can enjoy your favorite beverage while watching these exciting programs. All right. We'll see you tomorrow morning. Tomorrow afternoon.
Afternoon,
at 3 o'clock?
3 o'clock.
Tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock. John Ingram's Knowledge Nuggets on urine output on cardiopulmonary bypass. When is enough enough? Thank you. Good day.
Have a great day.